Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we got some really big announcement, a couple of class changes that I'll go into. Seems like some last minute PvP adjustments as well. But this giant interview that Ian Hazzikostas was a part of, talking about how things are changing at the company, how they're going to be working to improve their quality of life on their own job and their own work site, which all look great and amazing. And then there's this part, the future of World of Warcraft, which talks about kind of what they were thinking about in patch 9.1.5 and going forward for World of Warcraft. Because I think for a lot of people at the moment that have been playing the game for a long time is kind of thinking, is this a one-off? Is the future going to be like this? Is it just immediately going to go back to the way that it was? And I think that there are a couple points in this area of the interview that really do actually highlight the potential for change in the future, as well as the announcement of a new community feature, which I will get into after we go through this part of the interview. So for here, he was proposed a question. There are a lot of quality of life improvements coming to 9.1.5, and a lot of people are excited about those things, but a lot of people have expressed some frustration that they didn't happen sooner. Do you think there's something in the feedback loop that Blizzard can improve? So Hazzikostas, absolutely, we can always do better at listening to feedback. We can always do better at communicating what we've heard for feedback, but aren't necessarily acting on it for whatever reason or taking it under advisement and keeping an eye on it. This is feedback that, as the community pointed out, we've heard on many fronts going back to beta. In some areas we were wrong. The community said, hey, we think that conduit energy is going to be this frustrating system and it's not going to have the effects that you hoped it had. Our intent was similar to classic WoW respec costs, that it would be a friction that made you take these choices more seriously, but not ultimately lock you in permanently. So this point right here, this is when Classic WoW came out, and Classic WoW was insanely popular and insanely successful, right? So I can only imagine that they wanted to look back onto those previous iterations of the game and try and really, take out and distill what made that experience what it did. Unfortunately, I think that some of the things that were taken out from Classic WoW weren't necessarily the things that did actually make Classic WoW amazing. I think, if anything, the main complaint for Classic WoW is that you have to pay a lot of gold to respec. At least that's my own personal opinion of it. Actively playing in TBC is respecing to go into the raid and then respecing to go and then play arena, and maybe even do some differences in PvP between 2v2 or battlegrounds, or maybe I want to be DPS to go out and farm some mats somewhere in the world and I have to pay gold every time I want to switch into these different roles. It's not something that, at least for myself, I find personally intriguing. That's not the main reason that I'm playing Classic WoW. But you can see that there was a lot of motivations driven from the success of Classic WoW to try and take stuff from it and apply it to the retail game. But with this one, they learned that this wasn't what should have happened for the respecing costs. And I think you could see that in Battle for Azeroth as well, with the Azerite changing armor types having that scaling up gold cost. And I think now, hopefully, this means that in the future we won't see any more stuff like that. The conduit energy restricting you, these massive gold sinks to try and restrict you into these specific roles. And you've got two things that go along with this, right? You've got the players who want to min-max. So the way that I just described what I said would be min-maxing. I want to play what is going to perform the best in every aspect of the game that I'm actively wanting to engage in. And then you also have the creative types that want to move out and try different things and try different builds, but then there's just this kind of blockade, this wall that's stopping you from really reaching out and exploring other options in the game that are kind of just based on nothing other than time. That are just kind of blockades. They're gatekeeping the creativity or gatekeeping that content. So I don't think that there's really a positive element to having these restrictions, whether it is for min-max players or casual creative players. I think having it be more open for characters is going to be better for the game as a whole. And I think that you see this in other systems for other MMOs as well, right? With Final Fantasy having jobs. So you have one character and you switch between different classes on the one character. You're not going through the same thing every time as a result of that. In New World, having different weapon types that you can equip on that single character, that you're not having to kind of relive through the same experiences. Guild Wars 2 is a little bit more extreme, at least when it comes to PvP, by completely templating your character in that specific aspect of the game. I don't think that this time sync that's been implemented through Battle for Azeroth with the Azerite armor and then into Shadowlands with the conduit energy, to some extent as well, with legendaries costing so much gold at the moment, and then Soul Ash being time gated, really adds so much. I think that if a player wants to have this creative build, whatever it is, they're the rapid fire hunter, they went for some different conduits that are off meta and stuff like that, they can still do that while having the build be flexible. If anything, they're going to be more drawn to try something different because they're not permanently locked into it. At least for me, I wouldn't be permanently locked into it. I would want to try something unique. Maybe it's really cool and awesome. Actually, it outperforms or something, and everyone counted it out because on a sim machine it said it wasn't going to work. Whatever, right? I think that by leaving it open, you have more individual room for creativity than restricting it, because then there's going to be that fear element. There's going to be that, oh, I don't want to do this if it means that I'm never going to be invited to a group now, because I didn't pick the absolute best choice or something like that. So I do hope that this extends into future expansions, but it was a main point that stood out to me. In other areas, it's about watching the mainstream of the WoW player base, the broad range of the player base evolve, watching how they're playing the game. What we hear from more than just folks who are content creators or high-end raiders or PvP. This was an interesting statement. So trying to get the opinions of the kind of, the average Joe or just the average player, in World of Warcraft, because I mean, in a lot of cases you're probably not voicing your opinion too much, just kind of log in and you play the game, and if you're bored you stop, if you're not bored you keep playing, right? And what are those players thinking, because they're not usually probably going to be actively voicing their opinion a lot of the time. I do think getting a wide range of perspective is a good idea, but I also think that a lot of the time, as long as these content creators are remaining unbiased in their feedback, that generally the popularity of what they're creating, the engagement of what they're creating is going to stem to that actually being a problem, right? If I say something like buff mages, but the community doesn't think that mages need to be buffed, my video is not going to be successful, right? It's going to be clear that change isn't something that necessarily needs to be happening to the game. But this leads into the kind of the community feature that they're going to be moving forward to. But it seems like they want to get more of a diverse range of player type. So this is going to stem from anybody that's like a transmog collector, pet battler, whatever it happens to be. And I think that's a good thing, because everybody's got a different reason to play the game. I want the game to be as enjoyable for everybody to play it, so that we're all, having the best time. So I think this is a good idea. But it also kind of, I don't know, it has a little bit of a negative taste to me, to the way that you kind of highlighted these specific people. But one of the challenges in designing WoW is that there's a dozen different playstyles. Many of them are not as vocally or prominently represented. So what we hear from people who are trying to do high-end Radiant and always push with keystones, having to choose one covenant and not being able to use 2 or 3 freely, the system was frustrating. We understand that it wasn't surprising to us. We knew that if your orientation to the game, if you're a min-max player, you're going to want to always be optimal. But as we articulated, the goal of the design team was that the core RPG choice, that feeling of weighty decision, or picking this path versus that path. And you can see that this was also stemmed from classic WoW, right? Picking your talent rows and trying to get that locked in feel onto your character. They wanted to take that from classic, apply it to the retail game, because I would only assume that they thought that was the major reason for classic to do so well. This is obviously something that's been ingrained in their design choice throughout the entire history of the game. So that's why it was there. And having a different story you experience versus what your friends experienced was going to provide a better experience for a majority of the players. This is where I'm not sure if that really is going to come across. Like, if I'm a hunter who went Necrolord and I tried this other legendary, was my questing experience actually that dramatically different than the hunters who went Venthyr and some Flayed Shot legendary or something like that? Is it truly that much of a different experience? To me, the difference in experience stems, other than the story, right? The story makes a lot of sense, but as far as attacking mobs over and over, it's probably not going to change too much. And over time, what we continued to hear was, even though those who initially appreciated the choice, that diversity of experience months into the game down the line, once they played through those stories once, they'd seen it, particularly on alts, they too just wanted the ease of change that led us to the place here. So this is what I'm saying. So it seems like it makes sense at the start of a new expansion. You're going to pick something, you're locked into that experience, you're going to go through the story, and you're probably not going to be bored of the game at that point, because everything is new and very exciting, and you're going to go through that specific path. Now, what would be nice, I think, from my point of view, is that at a certain point you're going to get bored of the build that you've went, especially if the weighty decision to get locked in takes hundreds of hours to unlock, to the point where you're deterred from trying anything else. Over time, you're just going to continually get more and more and more and more bored. At least I would, or I have. So you want to have the ease of access, which can be tough, because with that weighty decision comes into wanting to, it's ironic, respect players' times, but not disrespect their time. So if I played in the first patch of the expansion and grinded all of the best gear and went through the hardest content, do you want to disrespect my time now in the next patch by allowing players to get up to my level through maybe not the most difficult content, or in a faster manner than what was available to me? Because to that player, that might be disrespecting their time, right? But also to the player who's trying to catch up and has to do hundreds of hours of stuff they don't want to do, it might be disrespecting their time a little bit as well. So with regards to that, what I would prefer is in the end game systems. We've had this in other iterations of World of Warcraft, the reputation tabard back in the day when dungeons were the thing. I think it was maybe in Wrath of the Lich King, where dungeons are super fun. Everyone was done with daily quests. Nobody wanted to do daily quests anymore, so they introduced the reputation tabard. So you could get reputation for doing the dungeons, and any one of them you wanted, wearing the specific tabard. And a lot of players really liked that at the time, but then that one faded away over time. I would have liked to have seen something like the Korthia tabard that you can wear. So any content you're doing in the game is going to provide your reputation towards the codex. But let's say that the specific activities that are designed in the Maw or Korthia reward you twice as fast that reputation. So you don't have to do it. You're going to get, you're going to gain the rewards half as slow. You'll get there. And if you want to, when nobody's around, to do maybe the content loop that you're normally doing, you'd go into Korthia and get that little extra bonus and push yourself along, or maybe you're really close, you just finish it off. This way, a player isn't forced into a gameplay loop. They can pick the one that they want, because I'm sure there are a lot of players that like going in Korthia, looting the chests, finding the mounts, and collecting the stuff that want to do that. But then there's other players who just want to purely compete in endgame Mythic Plus, PvP, or raiding, and having to spend so much time into those zones and not dedicating to the areas they want to excel in is just taking away from that experience. So this way, everybody is getting to progress towards the reputation. Everybody's getting to level up towards it and choosing what they want to do, and they can do whatever they want to do in the game. To me, that's something that I would have liked to have seen. And I think that the accessibility of alts needed to come in much sooner than 9.1.5, maybe even 9.1. Again, with everything going on in the world and at the company, the patches being delayed is kind of, you can't really count that too much, but maybe take that into account, that the patch is going to be long, and bring these mechanics in faster. But a lot of what goes into 9.1.5 isn't a one-off. It's a reflection of us changing a lot of the underlying philosophies that have motivated our approach to designing WoW. A lot of these things, like I mentioned regarding conduit energy, are outgrowths of lessons that were taught to us by our predecessors. So again, this seems to be a very instilled part of the game, right? From Classic, by the founders and the leaders of the team, about the importance of meaningful choice, the importance of preserving character investment that may have led to us not being friendly to alt gameplay, and people's ability to get caught up on their alts. The reality is the way people play the game has evolved. What was the right answer for WoW's player base in the game 15 years ago may not be today. And I think the advantage of this is that with Classic WoW being available, if you did want that experience, it is there for you. And then taking a more modern approach for the players who don't want it, then let's everybody have a choice. There's some stubbornness, but clinging to those old lessons, some things are harder to let go of when you're training your education as a designer and a developer on the team led to having these things instilled in you. So that was a big post, acknowledging that maybe we need to be less rigid and being willing to be more flexible towards what's in demand at the moment. So 9.1.5 reflects a shift toward more alt accessibility, more catch-up, more sensitivity, and respect for players' time, trying to look at what sorts of activities are going to be interesting once or twice, but maybe less interesting when you have to do them more than that. That's the big one right there, right? I had fun leveling up through Shadowlands initially, going through my Covenant campaign, getting through it, and then going and exploring the story, but then doing it again, and then again, and then again, and then again, and then again, just to try a different conduit, or just to try a different aesthetic, or just to try a whatever. It was just like, this isn't the loop that I come back to play the game for. Which it's not enabling itself, at least for me, to put me in the best position. And I think it isn't for anybody else who isn't specifically interested in that loop. Let's not make you do them more than that. Versus which activities are part of that core repeatable loop, like running dungeons or PvP at max level, things people want to get into without as many hurdles they have to clear on the way. This is exactly what I wanted to read, at least personally. Is removing the hurdles to get into those max level content points, because I feel like this is a sentiment not only for PvPers but Raiders and Mythic Plus as well. I think a lot of world first Raiders probably get burnt out having to grind 10 characters through the Maw and getting every conduit unlocked on 10 different classes because they're going to go for world first. And I mean, those people are probably burning out way harder than even PvP players are, I would think. And I think that feedback has been voiced now over time from people doing it. It's like the value of that content is just not the same as it used to be. And that's the same type of thing with when world quests were introduced in Legion. Everyone loved them. I mean, I even liked world quests for a long time when Legion came out. You can go back into my other videos when I was talking about them if you need to. But then in Battle for Azeroth, towards the end of Legion, it started to become like, yeah, I've done this, I've seen that. A lot of players were starting to just build towards resentment towards having to do them. But in Battle for Azeroth, when people had just kind of completely stopped doing them, instead of saying, hey, these world quests aren't really giving it to our current players, they just bumped the rewards up 3 times the amount, which then was like, oh, now everybody has to do this, which, yeah, drove the participation higher of that activity because everyone had to do it to do their endgame loops, raiding, PvP, or dungeons, but they weren't really liking it or enjoying it over time. Again, if you were new to that experience, I think you would have liked it, but with the long stem of players that have been playing for so long, eventually things just get old. So, adjusting for that and getting those hurdles out of the way rather than tripling down on their enforcement, I think is going to be a better approach overall into the future, which is what seems to be happening. That sort of approach is going to motivate how we approach our next patch in Shadowlands, which we'll talk about in the not too distant future and expansions to follow. Talking about community requests and maybe stubbornness is something like cross-faction raiding a bit more on the radar as a possibility these days. So that whole previous paragraph was like the type of stuff that I exactly wanted to hear, kind of readjusting to modern times, bringing the philosophies, trying to iterate on the past and then also trying to incorporate the future or the current present to deliver the best experience. This is now another thing that is something that I thought would never happen in this paragraph, a cross-faction group. So Hazukosa says here, I'd say that it is a bit more on the radar. So previously this was kind of like, no, Horde versus Alliance is the core of the game. Now it's on the radar. So, the line's moving a bit. That's one of those areas where a lot of things to solve, a lot of things to figure out to make it happen. But at the end of the day, if Jaina and Thrall are working alongside each other in the raid, why can't Alliance and Horde players also work alongside each other in that raid, especially when we know it's going to solve a lot of the social problems people are grappling with, particularly trying to keep a high-end Alliance guild together in North America or a Horde one in Oceania. I'm sure as a PvP player, you've experienced this in North America. If you're playing on Alliance, pugging is impossible for PvP. Horde, you're going to have a better time. In EU, it's the opposite, and this just happens to be because this is where the most amount of players are congregating. I think usually the streamers kind of control that, sadly, because those players will always be there because they're incentivized to be there monetarily. So they kind of drive and control that. I can even remember back to the days where like Recful or someone would want to make a server transfer, want to play the other faction, and whoop, everybody else is going immediately along with that because they want to be together, right? We all want to be in a community together. And then those people that are monetarily driven to be in this game will be there through the long haul. We don't have to worry about them disappearing. So we tend to follow those people and stick together in those groups. So allowing Horde and Alliance to queue together means the people that didn't want to pay money to follow that bandwagon and got left behind, or the people that just like the stuff on the other faction can still interact with the rest of the game. So I would personally like to see more Horde Alliance kind of grouping ability moving into the future. They talk a little bit about 9.2, they talk about 2.5, and they talk about 0.3. They're going to be doing a big announcement for 9.2. And again, there was a recent patch update in 9.1.5. Now, Mage's Icy Veins and Mage's Arcane Power, not Fire Mage Combust, are no longer purgeable, which is a really big change. And that was also iterated on from community feedback because they were making the Dark Souls unpurgeable. People were like, why don't you make these unpurgeable? And, the valid argument of it at the moment with how important cooldowns are, I think that was a wise move. The only thing about it was that I think it's Shadow Priests having infinite purges, or priests in general having infinite purges. It's more of a problem than these specific cooldowns being undispellable. But they're not going to be, and that was in reception. So I have to wait and see if it makes the game better or worse. But these two paragraphs are subjects that I really was not expecting this type of response. It was kind of always just like a yeah, we thought it worked out well kind of stuff, and then maybe it bounces back. This is the type of stuff that makes me think that into the future that things will change. And then that leads us into the community. So the community council, this is something they're introducing on the website. Seems like you can submit to it. It's open to any player interested in taking part. Then once players are selected, they'll be given the ability to post in the new discussion forum that's publicly visible to everyone. In this new forum, we'll ask members to share their experiences and perspectives on anything in the game, and some topics may be started by Blizzard developers and community managers. Responses and updates from Blizzard will be posted there so they can easily be discussed by the entire community. So it's going to be public, everything just easily viewed and accessed. Probably going to be really good content for YouTube to talk about these specific points. It kind of makes me wonder, I think, and this is a little bit of a different discussion, but once Twitter and social media kind of launched, it kind of, all of the discussion for the game moved from the forums onto these social media platforms. And I think for the main reason was because, you know, it was clout. It was right. I'm a designer. I'm going to get a lot of followers and they can all give me feedback here. And that was the main reason a lot of people followed specific people, was to try and have their voices heard. So it was kind of an external motivation, separate from just trying to make the game the best that it could be. And then a lot of the times it was, these aren't even the places to submit this type of feedback, please go here instead, type of stuff. And we've seen a lot of people that I think that have been voicing really good opinions online and through content creation that would fit this type of role, that have now at least announced that they've moved past WoW on their channels and to try and do different things because they don't think that their voices were being heard. So it's kind of those things where it's kind of like maybe a little bit sad that it literally went to that extent before trying to do something like this. Because, I mean, from my point of view, people can definitely be toxic, go over the top with stuff. I'm definitely guilty of it as well, as I'm sure most people are, because if we're super passionate about it, we just want the best thing for the game. We want to be delivering the best experience. We want everyone to be liking WoW. We want to be telling our friends to play WoW, and we want everybody to get involved, right? So it's going to be stemming a little bit from that, but being able to curtail it and then kind of refine it down to something that's actionable and usable, I think is going to be important. And it seems like now they are going to be willing to have these voices heard. I'm not sure if I'm going to personally with this. Maybe I will. Again, it seems like they want a wide range of opinions and playstyles and interests out there, like transmog farmers and stuff like that. So I would probably be applying from, again, the PvP point of view of it. So whether that was gearing or balance or changes specifically to PvP, that type of stuff, I was thinking about applying for it. I'm not sure. Or if we'll just keep our discussions here and then maybe we'll forward any good points that I come up with here to whoever does apply for it specifically. But I'm keeping my eye on this. I want to see what happens with this. Is this just posturing? Is this going to be actually used? Are the voices actually going to be listened to? The reason I think that they will be is because, again, in that previous interview, they talk about how the previous instillment of ideas and philosophies is maybe not going to be current with the current player base of the game. So this seems like a big shift anyways, overall, for World of Warcraft. And I just wanted to update you on it and some of my thoughts and some of my opinion. What do you think now, having seen these types of posts? I'll have links to these below the video as well. So if you want to check them out and read them yourselves for their entirety, then they'll be available there down in the description. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. Thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. Doing my best to upload as much as I can. So if you're interested in educational content for World of Warcraft to make the best decision to improve your gameplay experience, this is going to be the place that you are going to want to be subscribed to. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.